Hello everyone and welcome to another video. My name's Keir Smith. I went back and listened to Roger Waters' Radio KAOS album again recently. Now this has always been one of those albums that I've struggled with through the years. And I listened to it a second time and started to think about putting this video together. And I listened to it a third time. And it may well be that the penny has finally dropped with this rather confusing and much maligned album. So this is Roger Waters' second solo album, released in June 1987, and this is the album where he bizarrely embraces the mainstream sounds of the day. Oh yeah, this is high 80s production, gated drum machines and synthesizers all over the place. But beneath all of the gloss and sheen, it's still very much a Roger Waters album at heart. The political statements are still very much there. This time he's referencing Thatcher and Reagan. He also mentions the miners' strikes in the mid-80s, monetarism, capitalism, terrorism, and of course we have the lofty concept, and when I say lofty, this is really ambitious. So it's a story about a young man called Billy, and he lives with his brother called Benny, and Benny has a wife and a child, and they care for Billy because he's, according to the liner notes, a vegetable, which is old speak for someone who's deaf, dumb and blind. Now importantly, Billy can receive and hear radio waves without the aid of a tuner. Billy and Benny are Welsh. Benny, Billy's brother, was a Welsh miner, but now the mines have been closed down because of Thatcher. Anyway, the two of them go out on a bit of a pub crawl and pass a hi-fi shop where images of Margaret Thatcher are being shown across multiple TV screens. Benny gets angry and possibly smashes the shop window and steals a cordless phone. Later that night, Benny drops a concrete block off a motorway bridge and kills a passing taxi driver and is sent to prison. Benny's wife struggles to look after Billy as well as their young child, so Billy is sent to LA to live with his Uncle Dave, who emigrated out there after World War II. Are you still with me? This is the concept that I'm explaining to you. Now remember, Billy can hear radio waves, and with this cordless phone that Benny stole, he starts to experiment. He starts to make calls and access computers and speech synthesizers. He learns to speak. He then contacts Jim at Radio KAOS, who is a DJ there, and the two of them become friends. But then Reagan and Thatcher bomb Libya, and Billy takes big offence to this and sees this as an act of political entertainment. So he plans a little political entertainment of his own. So Billy develops his expertise with this cordless phone to the point where he can now access and control the most powerful computers in the world. Billy tricks and petrifies the entire world into thinking that there's going to be a nuclear war. But of course, Billy doesn't go through with it. He was merely trying to scare everyone, and scare them he did. Everyone sees that war is no good, and thus this ushers in a new era for love and peace. Well, what a load of old... No, that really is the concept. You can see why I've struggled with this album through the years, can't you? And all of that is crammed into a mere 8 songs. This album was originally conceived as a double album. I think Roger Waters said that he had 16 songs, but no, it's all crammed into 8 songs, 4 songs each side of the record. So with all of that said, let's get down to the music. So the DJ, Jim at Radio KAOS, is prominent on all of the tracks, coming in at the start and the end of the tracks, conversing with people and introducing the next song. This is KAOS. You and I are listening to KAOS in Los Angeles. And he introduces the first song on the album, Radio Waves. I remember when I first heard Radio Waves, I thought, my word, what has Roger done here? What on earth is this? It's up-tempo, it's catchy, glossy gliding synth lines, thudding drum machines, super sweet female backing vocals, and then Roger's rather dour vocal comes in. Sounds like he's got a cold. I must also say that whilst I normally love guitars, that screeching guitar sound on this track I always found a little overbearing too. I never much liked this song, but listening to it again this week, I don't know if I'm just softening in my old age, but I've forgiven it a little bit more. Conceptually, it introduces Billy here as Roger sings in the chorus, he hears radio waves. And I do rather like that lyric, AM, FM, weather and news. Our leaders had a frank exchange of views. Are you confused? Radio waves. But it doesn't quite save it. This song is all of the worst excesses of 80s production, if you ask me.
Barely climbed up on a footbridge, and he teetered on the parapet.
The quietude of Who Needs Information comes next. Well, at least to begin with. And the lyric goes, me and Benny went out last night looking for fun. And this part tells the story of how Benny kills the taxi driver and is taken to jail. But after the quietude of the verse, you then get the big booming drums for the chorus, and trumpets and saxophones are blaring all over the place, and the female backing singers are singing really high, and it's all mixed very loud. But Roger's vocal is a lot better here, and I do think that this is a much better song than Radio Waves. Roger's vocal is really good here, actually. In particular, I like the part where he shouts, "Can you see the whites of their headlights? Are they coming yet?" So as the song fades out, you then hear Billy come back in, talking on the radio show with Jim, and then you hear Jim ask the question, "So your brother's in jail?" And then you hear the jail door slam. Me or Him is next, and this is okay. It has that whirring synth melody running through the song and that circular guitar line, which is nice enough, but I don't like that guitar sound. It's prevalent on a lot of 80s albums, very much of its time, but it's nice enough. And it's in this song that we hear Benny asking for forgiveness as Roger sings, "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. Father, it was either me or him. Father, can we turn back the clock? I never meant to drop the concrete block." And then as the song plays out, we go a little off topic as a radio announcer comes in with some political views. A radio announcer, not Jim, the Radio KAOS DJ. He asks, "Do you really think Iranian terrorists would take Americans hostage if Ronald Reagan were president? Do you really think the Russians would have invaded Afghanistan if Ronald Reagan were president? Do you really think third-rate military dictators would laugh at America and burn our flag in contempt if Ronald Reagan were president?" And then you hear the concerned citizen reply, "Well, it might work." Roger was clearly keen to squeeze in some political views there, but it does lead us on nicely to the next song, The Powers That Be.
They like a tough game, no rules, some you win, some you lose. Competition good for you.
I really like The Powers That Be. I think it's a great song. I really like that heavy drumming at the start and the bass that goes with it, and those dramatic synth flourishes. They're fine by me. In particular, I really like the lyrics on the second verse. The powers that be, they like treats, tricks, carrots and sticks. They like fear and loathing. They like sheep's clothing and blacked out vans, contingency plans. They like death or glory. They love a good story. And it's got a really good chorus too, which is helped out once again by the female backing vocals, but more importantly by the considerable vocal talents of Paul Carrack. His vocals are great and make a really good song even better. But this song doesn't reveal too much in terms of the concept or the narrative. Billy says goodnight to Jim at the end of the track, and that closes side one if you're listening on vinyl. Though I would say that this album is best appreciated on CD. It needs to be played in its entirety. You don't really need a break.
I like riding in my uncle's car, down to the beach with pretty girls all parade.
So side two opens with the song Sunset Strip, and this is mellow, easy listening, drive home time, radio friendly, the most commercial thing that Roger Waters has ever released. But we're back on topic here and back in the concept. This is where Billy goes to live with his great uncle Dave in LA. Roger sings in the first verse, "I like staying with my uncle Dave, and I like playing with his Great Dane, but I don't fit. I feel alien and strange, kind of out of range." Billy feels like he doesn't fit in with the LA scene and longs to return home. "I sit in the canyon with my back to the sea. There's a blood-red dragon on a field of green, calling me back to the Black Hills again." I really like the outro to this song though, with that saxophone blaring, trumpets and an invested guitar solo. They all mesh together rather nicely, I think. And then the radio tunes back in and we get this rather strange fish report with various voices coming in and out. One says, "I don't like fish. Shellfish, guppy, salmon, shrimp and crab and lobster. My least hated favourite fish would be sole. Sole has no eyes. Make of that what you will." And then Jim comes back in and says, "We don't care. Shut up. Play the record." The presence of the radio and the conversations that go on throughout this album do kind of tie the album together rather nicely. So that brings us on to the song Home, and if I said at the start of the video that I've somewhat struggled with this album through the years, then for whatever reason I haven't struggled with the song Home despite its heavy thudding drum machines and the shiny synth lines. Lyrically, Roger lists loads of things here that one could relate to or call home, whether it's a place, Jerusalem, Cairo, Berlin, New York, Moscow, Llanelli. But Roger asks some strong and direct questions in the fantastic choruses. Will you accept your second-class status? Will you stand still for it, or will you take to the hills? Will you stand by, a passive spectator? Will you hear when the lion within you roars? Will you take to the hills? And the great Claire Torrey is the guest vocalist on this song, and she gives an impassioned vocal. Superb. I really like the saxophone solo in this song, and in particular, I really like what sounds like a screaming guitar. And then Roger lists a number of people that could be called home. Could be a male voice choir, could be a lover, could be a fighter, could be a super heavyweight, or it could be something lighter. Could be a cripple, could be a freak, could be a wop, gook, geek, could be a cop, could be a thief. And I love that bit at the end of the song where it sounds like Roger's reading poetry, where he says, "Bang, bang, shoot, shoot, white glove, thumb." That's pretty cool. I love Home. It's a heavy track, but a strong and engaging listen. There's a lot of information in the song Home, and after that song is finished, you could be forgiven for asking yourself, where are we now with the concept? But it's merely reinforcing what was on Sunset Strip, where Billy wants to go home, and I think he sees his brother Benny as his home.
After a near miss on a plane.
And from the song Home, we go to the next song, 4 Minutes, and there's a good bit of dialogue between Jim and Billy here at the start of the track that helps to piece their narrative together. But again, you have to refer to the lyric sheet to really know what's going on. So this is the part where Billy tells Jim over the radio that there's going to be a nuclear blast. And at first Jim tries to laugh it off and then realises that, wait a minute, Billy could be telling the truth. And he then reports that on air to his listeners. Billy says to Jim, 4 minutes and counting. Jim says, okay. Billy says, they pressed the button, Jim. And Jim asks, they pressed the button, Billy? What button? And Billy says, the big red one. And then Billy simply says, goodbye, Jim. And then Jim at first laughs it off and says, goodbye, oh yes. This ain't au revoir, it's goodbye, haha. But I like that bit where Jim continues with his on-air report and says, with only 4 minutes left to us, let's use this as wisely as possible. He then says, at Dodger Stadium, it's the bottom of the 7th, and the Dodgers are leading 3-0 over the Giants. If indeed the world is going to end, then, of course, we need to know the baseball score before we all go. A good bit of humour there, I thought. You can get lost in the dialogue here, but 4 minutes is actually a song, or rather half song, half theatrical soundscaping. And I guess lyrically here, Roger is trying to enforce the idea that after a near miss or after the potential of something bad happen, you take care of things in future so as not to be in that situation again. After a near miss on a plane, you swear you'll never fly again. After the first kiss, when you make up, you swear you'll never break up again. And then Claire Torrey comes back in again for the big chorus where she sings, sometimes I feel like going home. Sometimes I miss the rain and snow. And when the east wind blows, sometimes I feel like going home. It's all big and dramatic, but rather nice. And then the song breaks down rather mysteriously. You hear Jim come back in on the radio saying, Billy, if you're listening, please call. And then you hear this dizzying synth melody that sounds a little bit like On the Run from The Dark Side of the Moon. And then you hear this jarring, dramatic and cinematic, doom-laden sound. There's Doesn't that give this impression that the end is nigh? It's really well done, I think. And all the way through this song, you hear this ticking clock, and then Billy counts down from 10. And again, you hear this collage of sounds, and Margaret Thatcher's voice comes back in one final time. Our own independent nuclear deterrent has helped to keep the peace, has helped to keep the peace. And then one final voice, Jim says, goodbye, Billy. Listening back to the album a few times this past week, it really struck me how great a piece 4 minutes is. I guess before I didn't quite understand the importance of it, daft as that may sound. But if you care to listen to this album a few times in a row and you refer to the extensive liner notes, then it will help the listening experience. So that brings us to the final song, The Tide is Turning, open brackets, after Live Aid, close brackets. So the end of the world didn't happen, thank God. Immediately after the song 4 minutes, if again I may refer to the liner notes, it says, silence, white out, blackout, lights out. It didn't happen. We're still alive. Billy has drained the earth of power to create his illusion. All over the dark side of the earth, candles are lit. In the pub in Billy's home village in Wales, one man starts to sing. The other men join in. The tide is turning. Billy is home. This concept is so far-fetched, but enjoyable. And The Tide is Turning is a suitable end to this album. It's a really nice song, full of love and compassion. I do like that bleeping rhythmic pattern that runs through the verses, onto another lovely synth line in the chorus, and again, the female backing vocals, which are nice. The shuffling guitar parts are really nice on this song too, which I think are played by the great Andy Fairweather Lowe, a great friend of Roger Waters, of course. And again, some really good lyrics from Roger in the second verse here, where he sings, who is the strongest? Who is the best? Who holds the aces, the east or the west? This is the crap our children are learning. And then you hear that booming male voice choir that come in at the end, which is kind of nice. Oh, the tide is turning. But it's optimistic. The tide is turning. The tide is turning, Billy. And then that synth part ascends and takes the song away. And it's a nice and comforting end to this album. I really like The Tide is Turning. It's a really nice song. Are you still with me? Whew. Radio KAOS by Roger Waters. But I really enjoyed going back and listening to this album this past week, and it got better with the second and then the third listen. I pieced together lots of little bits that I hadn't quite pieced together before. I read an old review on Radio KAOS from when the album was released, and the critic said something along the lines of, one shouldn't have to constantly refer to liner notes in order to understand and enjoy an album. And I guess that's a fair enough comment. But I do think that this is a good album. Not a great one, but a good one. But for me, the problem is the concept is far too big. Certainly too big to be so thinly spread over a mere 8 songs. Remember, it was originally conceived as a double album and could have had as many as 16 songs on the album. Record companies don't like double albums, and I'm sure they said, can't we trim it down and make it an accessible single album? And you can pull out a few songs here and take them on their own merit, but again, this is a Roger Waters album. It's a concept. You have to hear the whole piece, and as I say, for me, it's too thinly spread. And I was thinking to myself this week that there are some songs here that are rather long. Home could have been trimmed, for example. Me or Him could have been trimmed, possibly a bit of Sunset Strip, and that maybe could have allowed for a little bit more room for another song, maybe 2 at a push. Or it could have opened up the option to put in a couple of link parts that piece the concept together a bit better. Roger Waters himself has since expressed his dislike for the album and said, between Ian Ritchie and myself, we really effed that record up. Ian Ritchie is the producer of the album. He went on to say, we tried too hard to make it sound modern. Also, the part where Billy pretends that he's just started the Third World War, I now find faintly embarrassing. And I dislike the backing vocals on The Tide is Turning. Admittedly, the concept is too far-fetched. But as I say, I rather enjoyed going back and giving this another listen, and I encourage you to do the same. It's by no means his best work, but there you have it. Roger Waters, Radio KAOS. But what do you think to this album? Please leave any thoughts and comments down below. I'll be interested to read what you all come up with for this. And as always, thank you so much for stopping by and watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you for my next one sooner rather than later. Until then, bye for now.